Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Divi Nation. Divi Nation is a podcast and video show by Elegant Themes, the creators of Divi, the ultimate WordPress theme and visual page builder. The goal of Divi Nation is really simple. We want to provide you with the knowledge, insights, and supportive community that you need to be successful with WordPress and Divi. I'm your host, Nathan B. Weller, and as your host, it's my job to facilitate that success by having various guests from the Divi and wider WordPress community onto the show to share their stories and experiences with you. In this episode, I interview Alyssa Gavinski of Felicity and Design, a studio that she founded and now runs as CEO. They provide their clients with a complete start-to-finish design and branding service that ensures consistency across the board. Oh, and they exclusively use Divi, which is always cool to hear. During the course of our conversation, Alyssa and I talk about lessons that she's learned during her career, some unique tips and tricks that her company has developed around their unique use of Divi, and a few memorable sayings that might just change the way you live and work. All that and more in today's episode of Divi Nation. Here it is. Alyssa, welcome to Divi Nation.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Nathan, for letting me come on here.
Absolutely. We were just mentioning before the recording started that it's been a while. This has been a long time coming. And that some guests that happen, some guests I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, would you like to be on the show? They're like, yeah. How about tomorrow? Or how about, like next week? And they're like, oh, definitely. Let's just do it. And we do it. And it's great. With you, we've been circling each other for like a year
like
trying to figure this out. Yeah.
Facebook Messenger tag. Yep.
But I'm glad we got it.
It literally said like June 2016, and I was like, I didn't read the 2016 part. I thought it was June, like this June, like last week, and I was like, I don't remember talking to you last week. But yeah, no, it was a year ago. Crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, typically the way this works is I have like a running list of people who basically have been nominated by the community who they want to see on the show. And I run through that list. I send out a bunch of emails or Facebook messages a lot of times, and then we just run through them. And what happened with you was I did a big batch of those messages. I booked a bunch of people, and I think we had to reschedule a couple times, and eventually it just kind of fell through the cracks, and we never followed up on it. And then I was like looking through my list again. I was like, how have I not had Alyssa on the show yet? She's a perfect guest. We got to do this.
I'm like, I want to be on there. I remember talking about it last year. Let's do this.
Yeah. So I'm glad we were able to follow back up around on it and get you on the show. What's up in your world? What's going on?
Oh my goodness. A lot of transition with my company. We just launched 2 new packages because we're trying to figure out like what do clients actually want versus what do they think they want versus what do we know that they really need. Well, I think there's a lot.
Before you jump into that explanation, I got ahead of myself. Maybe I should have said, can you please give your full introduction, like your full name, where you're from, and what company you work with? And in your case, what company you founded. So go ahead. I'll let you do that.
Sure. So my name is Alyssa, and I'm a mother of 4, and I launched or created Felicity and Design, although it wasn't started as Felicity and Design back then. We're about 3 years old, or just under 3 years old. And we've gone through some transitions with our branding and our own name, and we've landed at Felicity and Design, which I don't know if you know. Felicity means joy, immense joy and happiness.
Nice.
So that's kind of what I love to do is put joy and happiness with design and just makes things better and look prettier. Yeah.
Nice. Where are you located at?
I'm actually in Alberta, Canada.
I don't know Canadian geography, but where is that in relation to the United States? Like the different states?
Montana.
Okay. Just straight up?
Straight up. If I drive three hours south of where I am, I will hit Montana.
Oh, that's a state I really want to go to, Montana, but I could talk for hours about that. But big sky country, gorgeous national parks. Nice. I need to go to Montana. Anyway, let's talk about your history with WordPress and design. I'm always curious about how people, right now you're running a studio. I'm looking at your website. You've got a whole team of folks who are working with you. You got some beautiful work here. Looks like you guys are doing some awesome stuff. How did it all start?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So actually what's funny is I used to be a blogger with using like Blogspot years ago, like 7 years ago. And I remember hearing about WordPress, like WordPress.com at that point. And I actually tried to create an account and I was like totally freaked out. I was like, this is too much. So I got introduced to WordPress back then, but I was like, no, it's too much. My backstory is kind of like a weird road. I've always loved art and design, but I was always told that art doesn't make money. So you have to go into the sciences. So I did go get a degree in the Faculty of Medicine and Computer Science and research, but I didn't love it. In fact, I would say that quite opposite. I hated it. So I thought actually having children would be easier. So I became a mom, and I had 4 kids in 4 years. And when my last one, my youngest was born, he actually almost died at birth. And it was a really scary time. He's the cutest little 3.5-year-old now. But at the time it was really scary, and it really transformed the way that I looked at things. And I stopped trying to do what other people told me to do and trying to do what people, what society tells you should be doing. Like art doesn't make money, so you cannot be an artist.
Yeah.
Web design is an art. And so I took my passion and began a graphic design studio. And what was funny is I built my website in GoDaddy Website Builder. My very first website. And I was like, this is kind of fun. I wonder if I could do this for real. And I actually created a WordPress site for myself. And I was like, this is kind of taking all of my computer science background and my programming. And I was like, I love it. So I just started to do it, just offered it not because I was told I should do it, but because I wanted to.
Yeah.
So it kind of started just organically, I guess.
Oh, wow. That's so cool. Yeah. It's amazing how we go through these experiences in life, and sometimes something will just kind of shake you out of that, whatever, path that you might, like your default path through life, where it's like, well, forces have pushed me here,
It's just what it is.
Yeah. I'm going where I'm going. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, is this really what I want? Is this what I want to be doing?
Right. And like, I have control of where I'm going.
Yeah.
Not the universe, like not society doesn't tell me where to go. So I should. So yeah, that's kind of changed my whole vision of life. So yeah.
That is really cool. You're saying that you got into WordPress, and after you'd done that whole big journey where you realized the new direction you want to go, you're trying to figure out how to offer design and do art as a business. And WordPress was that solution for you.
Yep, exactly. What I loved about WordPress was everything was a puzzle. Every different client, every different website was like a different puzzle. I had to figure out how to get it to work, especially because I wasn't, educated strictly through like a course. I was all self-taught. So whenever a client said, "Can you do this?" I was like, "Yeah." And then I just learned how to do it.
So tell me a bit more about your computer science background. Did that actually really assist you directly, or did it just give you sort of like did you learn, like PHP and JavaScript and stuff like that, and then we're like, oh, perfect, that is a direct fit for what I'm doing? Or did it just give you like a sort of familiarity with like engineering and software development or whatever, and you were able to kind of transfer that into WordPress? What was that like?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of both. So I didn't learn like HTML and PHP, and like I still cannot code a website from scratch, but I learned Java and like just different type of coding.
Sure.
But what I found was the most transferable skill was troubleshooting.
Yep.
Like being able to break it down and like step back and like look at, okay, this is supposed to happen and then this is supposed to happen, and so where's the breakdown? So I think the troubleshooting was the most transferable skill. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting how even when you work in and around stuff, or you work with, say you work in, I worked in film and television, so being around video production made creating a podcast years down the road much easier, because I kind of had a vocabulary that worked for that. So
the vocabulary, exactly.
Yeah. So for you, I could imagine where you learned a totally different skill set in your engineering or computer science rather degree, but then that gave you a vocabulary to approach the technical aspects of WordPress website building.
Yeah, and like although I can't code from scratch like WordPress, I can read it. Like I can go into the functions file and I can follow the code and the logic.
That makes
so you know what I mean.
That's got to make things so much easier.
At least I know kind of what I'm looking for, and like if then statements. Yeah.
Well, cool. So tell us about maybe your first client or first batch of clients. How did it actually get kicked off? Like you wanted to do it, you offered your services. What was the next stage like?
Yeah. So I'll jump back even a couple months earlier than that. When I launched the graphic design studio, I offered logo design. very stupidly low price. It was $15 Canadian, which is like $10 US. But I ended up getting 105 clients in 3 weeks.
Whoa.
So yeah, so
That's
it was like 2 months. It was 2 months of endless, like no sleep. And I learned a lot, built my portfolio up, got a lot of like clients who now knew who I was, referrals. I built up the reviews on my Facebook page. And I kind of took, not that I would recommend this approach, but I took the same approach to the web design part. I offered web design for $350 bucks Canadian, which is again like $280 US. And I got like 5 clients in the first month or something, but it built up that momentum. And again, I learned a lot because it was all self-taught. And so for me at the time, it was okay because I felt like that's what I earned because I wasn't a pro
You're
at
like
that
learning
time.
on the job at that point.
Learning on the job, exactly, like an intern kind of.
And if someone buys a $350 website, I think whether they know it or not, that's what they're getting. That's what they're buying. Right. They're buying someone who's figuring stuff out.
Who's still learning and going to make mistakes. Yeah. So that's kind of the approach I took with my first batch of clients in both the graphic and the web design portion.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's a kind of a recurring theme with a lot of people on the show is that everybody at the beginning, and it seems pretty common, they have that period where they put themselves out there, whether by accident or by design. Their services are cheap, or they do free work plus cheap work, and they just grind it out for a while until they really figure out what it is they want to specialize in, what it is they feel like they're really good at. And then they bump their prices bit by bit as fast as they can till the point where they get where they're leading a more sustainable, enjoyable life. What are those things for you? I mean, I noticed you still do branding. So are you still doing like logo design? What are the things that you settled on when it came time for you to make that transition?
That's a really good question. What I found was I like doing the whole package from beginning of like, you have no visual presence all the way till you have an e-commerce shop running. Oh, wow. So brand board, logo design, business card design, social media graphics, all the way up to the website. And we used to offer just a logo, and I kept learning that like, yes, I could offer just a logo. It's a cheaper product. It doesn't have to be $5,000 for them to invest in right away, but it's not actually helping them. What I found was most times if you give people just a logo, there's no back prep for them. There's not like a foundation that they're really going forward with. It's actually hurting them in the long run. So what we ended up settling...
Can you explain that a little bit more for people who may not follow that? You're saying if you're just doing a logo and you just give someone like, here's a logo that I came up with or that we collaborated on. Yeah. You're saying that could be a negative in the long run if you leave it at that? Because I'm sure that's kind of part of your pitch as a business, so maybe you can explain it a little bit more.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Why that's your mindset.
Yeah, so our branding strategist that we have on our team, her name is Claire. She put it so eloquently. If you create just a logo and you throw it out there, it's almost as though you're creating like a mannequin, like a faceless, nameless entity that you have to connect with.
So just I'm a geek about branding, and I'm a geek about the symbolism in branding, and I don't know if you're familiar, and maybe I would have this conversation with your brand specialist, but in King Arthur stories, there's this concept of the Holy Grail as what's called like an empty metaphor, meaning it can be anything. And I feel like when people throw up a brand that's completely unheard of, it's just graphical elements. They don't have a lot of content. They don't have a lot of presence. They're just this empty vessel waiting to be filled up. And that's what you're talking about is like, it doesn't stand for anything yet, but whatever you do will then become the thing that represents. So branding is weird in that way. It's this idea that like, yes, you have to have visuals that say what you want, but in a huge way, what you do and what you say will associate so strongly with those images that then it's kind of reverse, back
and forth. Yeah. And the other thing is like, you will have a logo. Like I have a logo, you have a logo, like everyone will have a logo, but it doesn't need to be the first thing you put out there.
Sure.
You need to think about it first, like, because people aren't going to connect with a logo. They're going to connect with the feelings or the person behind the logo. Yeah. So again, if you just throw out just a logo, like a fancy font, it's like this faceless mannequin as opposed to this human you can actually connect with. Yeah. So
I even like the idea of the mannequin even better, because in a store, when you see a mannequin, it's dressed in awesome clothing, but it's just this blank face. You don't know who it is.
Exactly. You can't talk to them. You don't know what they're about. There's no connection there.
Yeah,
sure, it looks nice.
Great.
It looks pretty. Yeah.
I'm going to use that just so you guys know. I'm going to use that when I explain branding to people now.
Sure. Yeah, no, Claire is awesome. She just joined our team. We've offered logo design as part of our web design packages because, again, to get a really good website, I do think you need to have that branding foundation. Mm-hmm. But we're growing it even one step further and having that pre-brand strategy before even the design elements come in. So yeah, that's kind of, we're always growing and transitioning ourselves too, which is kind of fun as a company.
That's really cool. So a lot of times we ask people like, oh, that's cool. So that's kind of how you got from point A to point B. Where did Divi come into this situation? So how do you guys use Divi on a daily basis, or if not daily, just how to use it?
Yeah, so Divi is our exclusive theme that we use. We only use Divi. I used to be more open and be like, yeah, sure, we can work with any theme that our client has. Mm-hmm. But now literally it's been 2 years of being in love with Divi. There's so much community support behind it and extensions that are built for it that I almost feel like it's unmatched in the possibilities that it can create. It's only my own creativity and imagination that's going to hold me back. So whereas if I played with like 8 different themes, there's all these troubleshooting things I'd have to go through. Whereas with Divi, I can really focus and, I know exactly where everything is and it's a really quick process. So I've fallen in love with it 2 years ago and we still use it now exclusively.
Nice. So I love getting plugs, obviously, for Divi, but that's really only just to say that question is really only just to open the door up to, the many subtopics that we can then talk about, which is like, as a community who all uses Divi on a daily basis for basically the same work, is there anything special that you guys do? Or is there anything that, workflows you've developed or things that have kind of arisen out of your unique use of Divi that you might be able to share with the community?
So you know how people will often create child themes, and there's a lot of child theme developers, and you can sell them for $50 to $100 or whatever. What we've done, and this is actually just in the last few months, we have created kind of it's not, I wouldn't call it a template or a child theme. It's kind of a mix and match. I don't know if you remember, because you're a guy, I don't know if you played with fashion design tools as an 8-year-old kid, but back in the 70s and 80s, there used to be this toy called fashion plates. And it was kind of like a stencil where you would pick like the top, like the head, the body, and the legs, or like the hairstyle, the shirt, and the skirt. And you'd pick out the different, like the top, middle, and bottom. And you could create different fashion.
Oh, wow.
Based on the top, middle, and bottom. And so it was like an endless creation of like, yes, you had 3 tops, 3 middles, and 3 bottoms, but that actually equaled whatever, 3 times 27 different design outfits. Styles. Yeah. So I use that as inspiration to create one of our packages now. We call it the Sassy Starter, but it's like a template-based fashion plate, but for design, like for web design. So it's kind of like a mix of a child theme, but it's really this top, middle, and bottom. And then the client will pick which one they want, but it's all using Divi.
I see.
Divi modules, Divi libraries. Yeah.
Quick question. Are you talking about basic layouts? So you're
exactly.
Not just like, so you're saying like there's like a header
with different
header like formats. Image.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's different like body formats, and then there's different footer formats, footers. And then they can just kind of choose back and And do you have like on your site, do you have a way that people can navigate through? Yeah. How do you set that up?
I use Slider Revolution or Revolution Slider. Actually, I don't even know. I don't know. They go by both names, but I use Slider Revolution, and so I created 6. There's 6 of each: 6 top, 6 middle, and 6 bottom. And so they could just click through like the top, the middle, and the bottom, and the way that I created it in Photoshop, it's all connected.
So how do they choose? Is it like a form where they can go, okay, here's a pairing that I like, send that one off? How do they do that?
Yeah, so the way to see the options is in the sales page, but then once they purchase the package, they have an intake form, and in that form, one of the questions is, here are all the tops, the middles, and all the bottoms. Which one of each do you want? Yeah, so
I gotta ask, would you show this to our community in like a blog post or two, just how you do this? Because I think people would love that. I think it's such a clever thing. I've never thought of that before. And I've
yeah.
talked to a lot of people and thought about Divi and selling Divi stuff a lot. So I think that's quite clever. I would love to share that with people.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, so where were we going? I got too excited about a new blog post. No. Oh, yeah. So, what other things similar to that you feel like you guys do uniquely?
Well, like I said, our perspective on branding is a little bit unique in we don't target the client's client. We don't look at like, who is your ideal client? We first will look at the person themselves, what colors they resonate with, other websites that they like, So it's more of like, imagine if you were a kindergarten, you don't go up to kids to make friends by selling yourself to them and like being like, this is why I'm a good friend and this is why you should hire me and you're my ideal client friend. Yeah. No, you just do your own thing. You play your own toys. And so it's about being yourself and putting your own things as part of your sites, your color palette, your branding. And it makes it easier to be consistent throughout when you're yourself, right? You don't have to pretend to be somebody else, and it'll connect with people in a better way. At least that's how we feel. So. Oh,
that's really cool. I think I very much agree. It sounds like you're using a slightly different vocabulary to describe, or essentially the same concept that I'm a big proponent of, which is that, a person or a company's brand is actually made up of the collective values of that group. So if it's an individual or if it's a group, whatever the sort of like, so I actually have this technique I use where I'll like give people these like value discovery quizzes, and we'll like do this whole process of like, it's like quiz and discussion. And we narrow it down and find out like, what are the core values of each individual on this team. And then I compare all of those and I go, okay, where do all of these overlap? Okay, it looks like we have like 3 or 4 values that everyone shares. Maybe they're using slightly different terms for it. So then you have another brainstorm and you go, can we all agree on the terminology here and what these terms mean? Okay, these are now your corporate values because you all actually believe in them. And when you get up and go to work every day, you can now get up and go to work and say, I do what I'm living out what I believe in. And I don't have to have this disconnect from my life and my work. There's I can now just be me. And
exactly.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier before we started recording that was something that you guys are very passionate about. Maybe you can speak more to that.
Yeah. So mostly we work with solo entrepreneurs or like one person teams. But I really think that, like you just said, it can carry over into companies too, because whether or not you're a solo person or a company, people still connect with people.
Yep.
Right. So you need to have an element of a personality behind your brand or behind the company, behind that logo. And so, like you said, I love how you said that. Because again, we work with mostly solopreneurs, how having that overlap of like, what do you all already agree on and believe in? And what is the overlap that's already natural?
Yep.
Because I think people try too hard to, just like when my son almost died and I stopped doing what people told me I should do, I think people still do that, is they still try to fit into this box of what they think they are expected to look like, or that they think that they're expected to act like. And I think if you just wipe that away, people become more authentic and more approachable and easier to connect with. And I don't know, I think the world would be a better place overall.
I agree. I mean, if you study brands, like I'm sure you do, you notice that's a big recurring theme in every major brand that just like defied all conventions. Like you look at Apple or you look at all these, anybody who ever defied the category, they stopped picking the values that everybody else in their industry valued. And they said, what do I actually believe in? Okay, who cares what it is I make? Let's talk about how I make it, And so Steve Jobs and the group, they really decided that they were going to make their products by their values. And so that meant putting a premium on design. That meant putting a premium on creativity and expression and making sure that they attracted people who shared those values. And as a result, their customer base was fanatically loyal to them. Yeah. And I think that happens all the time. There's this awesome book. If you haven't heard of it or read it, it sounds like you would love it. It was really influential in the way that I think about branding is Tribal Leadership.
Okay.
And it's all about this idea of like how people from like even an evolutionary standpoint, how we've evolved to like form communities and why we form communities and how we organically choose leaders in those communities. And it's
all really good.
It's all like value based. And so it's like people, you know,
you connect with people that value the same things as you, right?
And the people who rise to the top are often the ones who organically embody those values to like the fullest extent. And so they become sort of like meta admirable amongst that group of people. They're like, oh, like that's the person who gets us, you know, like let's push them to the forefront.
Have you heard of Simon Sinek?
Yeah. He's the why guy.
He's this amazing video that I love and I reference all the time. And he talks about Apple and why Apple is so successful and how they came about, like how they've approached their brand.
Yeah.
And what I love is what he says is about people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Yep. Doesn't really matter what I sell. I could sell anything, web design or other, but it's because of the values that I have and the message that I put out there. That's what connects with people, and that's what they buy, right?
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, that's literally another way of saying the values thing. It's like everybody, they're all talking essentially about the same thing. And it's, get to that thing that gets to the essence of the person you're trying, or a company you're trying to represent. And when you think of like a company, a lot of times, like we said, people think in categories like, well, I am a business company, so my, or I'm like I'm a B2B company or enterprise level service, so I must have like professionalism as a value. Not if that's not one of your actual values. Right. Like it doesn't have to represent your company if it doesn't represent the people who make up your company.
Right. There's no should. I say stop shoulding yourself. Like stop shoulding all the time. There's no shoulds.
Maybe we should call it, that's what the episode should be called. Stop shoulding all over the place.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. So, man, I think that's such a great, way to approach branding and web design. But ironically, we actually haven't talked much about how that mindset feeds into the actual web design. Can you maybe speak to that? So that, because all that happens at the branding and the planning stage, how do you then carry over that essence of who you've discovered into, a Divi web design, for instance?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of the times, like a test that I will do or ask a client to do is if someone speaks to them, in social media, engages with them on social media or has a Zoom call with them or whatever, and then that person visits their website, ask them, is that the same? Like, are you feeling like it's the same person? Because the way you talk to someone in voice should be the same energy that you're putting across in social media and the same energy you're putting across in your website or on webinars or on whatever.
Yeah.
And so for me, web design is really just that, like another extension of putting yourself there and putting your personality into it. Yeah.
No, that's such a good point. I never thought about that. I never thought about the simple practice of just having a good meeting and then saying, hey, would you check out my website and let me know if you get the same vibe from my website that you just got from this conversation? That's such a cool, good tool. So how do you set that up? I mean, from a practical standpoint, I mean, like clearly that's not a conversation that you have with the designers. Or with a client. That's something the client has to do between, themselves and whoever's input it is they want. How do you go about facilitating that?
Often they'll actually bring it up to me. Like they'll say like, the reason that they're calling me is because, they have so many people say their website doesn't feel like them when they talk to them on the phone. So it's actually something that I often see that they're bringing to me before I even bring it up. But it's definitely something that you can always do that little test. Like even if, you yourself, you usually have a gut feeling like, yeah, I'm not really proud of my site. It doesn't really feel like me. It kind of looks like professional or like whatever. And I'm not really that way. Yeah. Usually you have a gut instinct, but usually the client will tell me that, so-and-so told them that it wasn't feeling like the same.
Interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So do you have any examples of like how someone made a change that better reflected who they were? Because it's so subjective. You almost can't explain it in terms of like design theory or principles. You have to just go, well, here's how that happened this time or this time.
Yeah. So the biggest example, it's like the biggest and also the simplest. One of my very first clients, I think she was like my fourth client or something. She was way back when I was really cheap. She had pink and purple all over her website. That was her color palette, pink and purple, because she wanted to attract women. And she assumed women like pink and purple, so I must have pink and purple.
She showed it her website.
She totally shit it all over it. She hated pink and purple. That's the funny thing, too. Not even that she liked pink and purple and wanted to attract women, she hated it. So we changed her color palette. It's black and red and white and very bold and high energy. And she has exploded. She's making like 6 figures now, blah, blah, blah. Like I can go into all that. But like you can just see her energy and her posts and her own confidence has increased. And like the people she attracts are people she likes to work with. It's not just people she thinks will have the biggest pocketbook. You know what I mean? Like it's people she wants to work with. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Wow. I almost like don't want to spoil I feel like the condensed goodness that was the few things that we talked about here, which is like, you know, get to the root of who you're representing, make sure that there's a visual, you know, representation of that by just really just getting personal feedback from people and then translating that into your designs. And then stop listening to all the shoulds in your head and do what's legit. The one thing that I do want to ask you though is, you know, do you have a process of absorbing all this kind of raw feedback and turning it into something tangible like a design or an inspiration board or something?
So my biggest thing with that is, especially if maybe you're not in the position to hire a designer or work with somebody, you can still begin that process of figuring out who you are and what you're naturally drawn to by just creating, I just say, a simple Pinterest board. Like just collect color palettes, collect websites, images, anything that makes you stop. Like when you're scrolling and you have to stop and like look back. Pin that picture, right? That's going to be telling you something that caught your eye. Anything that catches your eye, pin it. And I bet, you know, once you collect 20 or 40 images, you're going to start to see a pattern. And it might be a color palette. It might be a style of font. It might be, you know, watercolor texture versus geometrics. But you'll probably notice a pattern.
You have inspired me because I had a Tumblr. I had a Tumblr for years that I kept up religiously. I did 50 plus posts a day on this Tumblr for like 6 or 7 years or something like that. And I mean, a lot of them were scheduled, but I had this whole complex thing. But I did exactly what you're talking about is I only pinned things. It was sort of like a stream of consciousness blogging. And so what I would do is I would wake up in the morning. I had like 600 some blogs that I subscribed to that were basically just like inspiration type blogs of like images and design and stuff like that. And I would just instantly like image blog everything that just made me stop and go, whoa, cool. And I would put like a 1 or 2 word or 1 sentence caption on it and be like, whoa, cool. And then blog it. And what I loved about that was over time, you know, I could have this masonry blog layout that was just all the stuff that I was like, that's awesome.
That you loved. Yeah, exactly.
And what's funny though is like when I tried to transfer my blogging over to WordPress, and this, like I said, this is years ago, I was never able to recapture that because I was always taking my cues from like, well, what do popular themes do? Or what are like,
what is out there that other people are doing?
Yeah. What do like real bloggers do? You know, like what do people who are successful do? You know, and to a certain extent, and because I've always been, you know, because I've been a professional blogger for a long time, so I do know that there are principles behind certain layout techniques and why things go. But I recently relaunched my website, and now I want to be like, nobody go there. But but I recently relaunched my website, and I did it because I was like, you know, I want to get back to that root of blogging. This is a personal blog. I don't need to make money with this thing. This is literally just for me to go. This is
do what you want.
Yeah, this is what I find fascinating. This is what I find cool. This is what I'm doing. So now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go back to my old Tumblr blog. I'm going to mine it for some data, and I'm going to see if I can come up with a more authentic visual language for myself.
Awesome. I love that. Very cool.
Well, thank you so much for your inspiration, for your insights. We're running out of time for the standard interview. I think this was a great one. I know I got a lot out of it. Clearly.
I love it. This is great to talk to you.
So yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Nathan.
Well, that's all for this episode of Divi Nation. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I just want to give another big thank you to our guest, Alyssa Gavinski, for coming on the show. If you have any questions about what we discussed in today's episode, please feel free to leave them in the comments section on the Elegant Themes blog, and we will be sure to respond. Thanks again for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you all around the community. And as always, we will be back next week right here with another episode of Divi Nation.